Hi everyone, my name is Teray with Peace and Make, and in today's video we are going to go over part 3 of my sewing adventures of making a baby blanket. So if you haven't watched part 1 and part 2, go on ahead and do that. For this video we are going to be working on prepping the blanket for the binding, then we're going to go into making the binding, and finally you'll see the finished product, or you'll see the finished baby blanket. So please enjoy today's video. The next part we're going to go into is the process or overview of today's video. You'll see that in this sketch coming up. In this part 3, what I'm going to do is add the binding around it. Binding is a little bit tricky to draw, but basically you'll see this around the entire blanket. Sorry that my blanket lines are not straight. That's super crooked. But you'll have a binding around the quilt. And it's actually folded on top of the edge of these diamonds. So really, excuse me, really the binding is going to be, I'll draw it really lightly. Really the binding is in here. That is totally not a straight line, so I'm just going to sketch it by hand. It's going to cover these quilt marks, the binding. So when I do the binding, it's going to create this inside square or a rectangle, because it's probably not a perfect square with it being 1 yard of fabric. But yeah, this is the process, the 3-part process of making this blanket. Okay, so I am back with another face voiceover, and I'm going to go through the clips of the video and also the process of making the baby blanket. So here we go. Okay, so for the first part, the first step, what we're going to do is cut around the edges of the blanket so that we can get a clean edge, an even edge of the top fabric and the bottom fabric of the blanket. Also, in this view, you can see the really pretty diamond pattern that has formed. It turned out really nicely, so I'm very excited about that. There goes the first cut. Now I can use that piece of fabric as scrap fabric to make something else. If you have any suggestions on what else I can do with that fabric, please let me know, because I'm actually not sure right now. But it's a large piece of fabric, so I want to save it. I definitely want to save it for something else. The scissors just were like giving me more trouble, so I used a rotary cutter. I actually prefer the scissors, but for whatever reason in this case it was just easier to just roll it with the rotary cutter. Another thing with the rotary cutter is that cutting straight lines, it's so much easier when you just have a long straight line to cut, which is why I mostly use the rotary cutter for like projects, blankets, bags, versus cutting. When I cut garments, some people still use a rotary cutter, but there's so many curves and small spaces, I just prefer to use a scissors. I can be more accurate with it. Alright, so I finished cutting around the edges. Now I am going to measure out the binding. What I decided is to cut out 4-inch wide strips of the fabric. And the reason for that is because I want a wider binding. The video that I watched about the binding, it actually had a thinner piece to cut, but 4 worked out better for me because what I'm going to do is fold it in half like I'm showing you right now, and then fold in the sides. Actually, when I start binding it, I'll bind it a little bit differently than what I had anticipated. What I just showed you is how I would bind it when I'm sewing a garment, but for binding the edges of a quilt, it's a little bit different. But that 4-inch binding cut, that actually worked. Now I'm just doing like a test run. I'm a very visual person, so I laid the binding against the edge of the blanket just so that I could see how the two colors play together, as far as the colors in the binding and the colors of the top part of the quilt. And I really like it. Also, this helps me to visualize how wide I want to sew the edge of the binding. I believe I ended up sewing a 1/2 inch and I made a 1/2 inch seam allowance. That's what I mean. Okay, just showing you all the yellow polka dots. And now we'll head over to the sewing machine, because what I need to do, all of the strips that I cut for the binding, I need to connect them together into one long continuous piece. By doing that, what I'm going to do is stitch from corner to corner, as you can see in the video. The other thing that I'll forewarn you about is that this is not a full binder tutorial. This is just a general overview. I'm thinking about doing a binding video, so if you think that you would like to see that, let me know in the comments below. And then I can make a binding video, because this one is not explaining everything. And I can be more accurate. Actually, if I had put a binding tutorial in here, this video would be twice as long. Like, I can make a full video just from showing you all how to do binding. But yeah, I found this part actually a lot of fun, like combining the binding. And for the longest, I wanted to learn how to do binding. A lot of times for my garments, I'll just buy binding, but I needed way more binding for this project, so I had to figure out how to make it, and I really like it. And now I can use what I learned to make it with other projects. I want to make like all the binding now. They have all this quilting cotton at fabric stores, and it's not even that expensive, and so you can make a whole bunch of cool binding. What I'm doing now is sewing the binding down. So for the pieces that need to be connected, actually I'm sewing the binding in half, because you don't want to have to worry about continuously pinching the fabric together as you sew it. So it's just easier just to iron it down. Look how pretty that is. Oh my gosh. I love it. Alright, so now I'm going to start sewing the binding to the blanket. And the reason why I call this my sewing adventure is because this is my first baby blanket using these techniques. So I'm kind of like feeling my way out. I'm actually going to post some more videos of me making the other two baby blankets that I made. And you'll see the process as I like work along. What I do right here, I'm just starting the binding. What I've created is like a little envelope because the other end of the binding is going to fit right into that little piece. And the edge, making a mitered corner. This was actually a pretty fun step as well. Alright, so now I'm showing you all, I skipped some steps, but no worries. If you want to see the binding tutorial, let me know. The next thing I'm showing is when basically you have the binding like this and then you fold it over to the back side, the bottom side of the blanket. And what I'm doing is I'm stitching in the ditch so that I can sew down that bottom part of the binding. By the way, you can kind of see my arms in this video. It reminds me, years ago when I made my first button-up shirt, I'm wearing the button-up, and what I did with it, instead of making it a center front, it was like center left a little bit. It was a little bit off. And so I was like, you know what, I don't want to take it all apart. So I just took the buttons off, used it for another project. And I use that just to like keep myself warm in my house. But I still love that shirt, and it reminds me of like good times. But yeah, you can see me folding the binding over and sewing down the binding to the bottom part of the fabric. And so you can see what the binding looks like. It looks really, really pretty, y'all. Oh my gosh, I really enjoyed making this binding, and it finishes the quilt off so nicely. And then you can see the bottom part of it briefly. Yeah. Okay, so now it's time for the final reveal with the binding on it. And you can still see my initial like line that I used to mark. And basically if you just iron that out, the friction pin, it'll come right out. But yeah, it's so pretty. Alright, so that is all for the first baby blanket that I made. It is our first of the 3-part series. It's our last of the 3-part series. So go back and watch parts 1 and 2 so that you can get a general overview of making this blanket, and I hope that it really helps with your project. As I said in this video, the binding part is not a tutorial because I have to go into more depth about it. But overall, I hope that you enjoyed watching. I hope that you learned some things. Let me know if you watched all 3 parts of the series. I don't even know like how many folks are actually watching this, but it was really fun to make, and it's fun doing these face voiceovers. So you will see me, or what do I call it, a face over. You'll see me doing these more in the future. If you like this video, if you like my other videos, then you can please subscribe and like the video. I want to get my likes up on the video so that the algorithm can just shoot this stuff out into the internet space and more people can see and learn how to make things with their sewing machine, which is like a really nice form of artistry. So yeah, alright, I will see you all in the next video. Bye!